good morning, or good evening, and welcome to the Backend Engineering Show every Saturday. How about we get started, guys? Let's get started. Let's get this party started. How is everybody doing, y'all? How's everybody doing? So, I decided to make this today's live stream a little bit less formal, I guess. So we're just gonna discuss some questions, Q&A. Keep it cash. We're gonna keep it cash. Can you guys hear me? Everything is okay? Oh, what up? CB, what is going on? Yusuf, what up? Roshan. Lamer. I am Elias from Algeria. Big fan. Thank you, Elias. Welcome to the channel. Muhammad Sakhar. Or Sakhar. Hi Hussein, can you please give advice for junior back-end developers to build scalable applications if he or she works as a freelancer or work alone without senior team leader? Well, here's the thing, guys. You can't possibly expect a junior or someone who just started to build a scalable app from the get-go. This is just a recipe for failure, in my opinion. And I hate these companies that just set so much high expectations. It's like, that's not true. Building a scalable app takes a team effort, takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of time, right? Everybody claims that they can build Facebook clone or Twitter clone. It's all BS. To build a real scalable app, you need a team. You need real team. You need thinking. You need to think about everything. There's security aspects. There is scalability. There is resources, servers, all that stuff. Yeah, the cloud made it easier, but it's not as easy. So that's the first thing. You have to take it easy because you cannot think that, oh, I'm going to build a scalable app. Build an app first. Don't worry about scaling it. If you're just starting, just build something. And then you'll find out, oh, it doesn't scale here. It doesn't scale here. Greeting from Costa Rica, James. What is up? Please make a video on OAuth and OpenID. So, Nikhil, my major weakness when it comes to engineering, and I have so many weaknesses, and one of the major weaknesses is authentication. I know very, very little about my authentication in general. My friend and colleague Mohammed Al-Sharif, he has a YouTube channel. He mostly speaks Arabic, but he works at Okta, and he is the guy to ask when it comes to anything authentication or security. Right? Security and authentication are a little bit different. I guess authentication is a part of security. So I try to understand authentication. I know very, very little about it. I made a video about authentication, various mode. I tried to break it down to kind of understand it, but still, every field is so deep, and you can't possibly know everything. So yeah, I might consider, if I am interested in authentication, which I am currently not, because I'm working on other stuff. If I am, maybe, sure. Have you heard of vSender? I have not. What is that? What motivates you on learning tech? That's a good question. What motivates you of learning technology in general? So, motivation in general is a very tricky word because to be motivated to learn something or to do anything in life, you have to have a goal behind what you're trying to learn. And if you have that goal clear, then the motivation will kind of come to you. If you don't know where you're going with this, then you're gonna try. You might a little bit suffer as a result. This weather is making me really sweaty. Although it's really cold here, but I think I might take it off. Okta is awesome. I agree. But yeah, generally, what motivates me personally is I want to become a better software engineer, and I know I'm not. I know I'm not. And I know the weaknesses that I have, and I just want to become one of the best, if not the best. And that goal in mind that I have, and I don't think I shared this with anyone, is just that goal is going to be forever, right? I'm not going to become the best. I know that because they're better developers, they're better engineers, they're better everything. But that's my goal. Just become the best. And to do that, every day you wake up, you gotta pick up a new piece of information. You're gonna learn something. And I have to generously try to share it back with you guys. And that's what it's all about. And that's another goal that I have that makes me motivated is I want to make software engineering, backend engineering, front-end engineering, all kind of engineering accessible and a commodity essentially. And I want to democratize this field because let's be honest, when I started learning, I want to learn anything in software architecture or backend engineering, there's almost zero resources, or even if there was, they are behind some sort of a enormous paywall, right? Or it's mostly outdated. So I want to break that. I want to make it accessible. I want to make not necessarily for free, not all the time, but I just want to make things that understanding things becoming easier. Because let's be honest, if you read the RFC, it's like written in Chinese, unless you speak Chinese. That's a different story. RFCs are very hard to read. Most academic research are very hard to read because those guys are on a different level. They cannot. They are gifted. They are so genius and smart, but let's be honest, they can't explain for shit. So most of them, right? Most engineers are smart. They can't explain. They don't have that skill set to explain to actually deliver information. Professors, on the other hand, that's different story. So I try to make this gap, essentially bridge that gap. Can you share your default Vim setup if you have one? Oh man, I set up Vim I think 2 years ago and I completely forgot. I just made it green and I made it understand this HTTP thingy and syntax, and that's it. I forgot about it. I'll try to share it. What's his name? Ben Awal, I think. He made a video on Vim that was good. I think he set up a profile too, so check him out. Well, Les, what do you have? Do you have developer imposter syndrome during the starting stage? All the freaking time, my friend, all the freaking time. Imposter syndrome is the ability to just like, okay, do you think you don't know anything? Essentially, it's like, okay, you think you're an imposter, essentially, right, or a fraud. I get that a lot, especially when I talk about things that is outside my knowledge. But to me, I always say, guys, this is what I think, right? If I am wrong, please correct me. I always say that. And then people do correct me all the time. And I'm just not scared of being wrong, I guess. Thank you for becoming a member. I cannot pronounce your name. I'm sorry. It's in... I gotta do that. Translate. So I can translate. Google Translate. Just a second, guys. Dead air. Yuval Sagron. What language? Oh, it's Hebrew. Oh, interesting. Yuval, thank you for becoming a member. Welcome to Engineer. It's funny, Hebrew is the closest to Arabic, yet I don't know how to read it. But I know how it sounds, funny enough. What else? So yeah, imposter syndrome. You guys are active today, huh? Even on slow mode. All right, so yeah, imposter syndrome is very critical. I mean, you have to know that you don't know, and then just do it anyway. I mean, nothing wrong to teach people what you absolutely know and say, "Hey, I don't know this thing. I don't know this thing." So yeah, Avi says, "Is the back end engineering beginner up to date?" Always. I mean, what do you mean by up to date? I keep adding new content to it if I think it will fit into the beginner track, the back engineering track, which I believe that people should know these things. So if you watch this in order, you're good to go. Ugh, English. But yeah, I keep updating it with new videos. As I make new videos, then I say, okay, this will be a great fit in the backend engineering playlist, the beginners. So I think people should know about this. But it's not, you can only know so much fundamentals as a beginner. So that's why I update the intermediate and the advanced more these days, because I focus on advanced topics these days, obviously, as I advance myself. Hi, Hussein. Aktush, hi, Hussein. Thanks for the great content. As someone having close to 3.5 years of experience in the backend, what do you prefer in the going in depth of few tech, exploring the breadth and deep dive later? Okay, so you're now spent almost 4 years on the backend, which is technically you're just starting, which is not wrong at all. But I think ask yourself, in the 4 years that you already started, what did you like that you have explored? I am assuming in the 40s, hopefully you explored everything in the backend. If you didn't, spend the next year exploring everything in the backend. I'm talking security, I'm talking proxies, I'm talking Nginx, I'm talking web servers, right? I'm talking databases, I'm talking different type of database, I'm talking row column databases, I'm talking column store databases, row store and column store. I'm talking NoSQL, I'm talking SQL, all these stuff. Explore all of that stuff. Just know what they mean, and then pick something that just somehow resonated with you. Once you have this, oh, I love databases, relational databases, so SQL databases that are column oriented, targeted for OLAP workload. Just that, which is so niche, people pay ungodly amount of money for engineers who are OLAP, SQL, column store specific. So that means you just, and if you want to stick to one database, that's even better. But my experience is like, okay, let's experience with different databases that support that. MariaDB, MySQL with Oracle now, this SQL HANA, SAP HANA. Taste. And then pick something that you like and then dive deep into it. To me, I'm tasting different things. And I even now, how many years of experience I have now? Jeez, I lost count. 17? And I still taste. I have experience, in-depth experience in so many of these, but I take my head off and then try something else that I'm not comfortable with from now on. Authentication is one of them. I don't know almost anything about authentication. I know what it means. I know how it works. I know the fundamentals behind, but I don't know the tools. I still don't agree or think JWT is a good solution, in my opinion. I think that the whole access token, refresh token is weird. The idea of having two things to authenticate, maybe I don't understand, but it's just silly. I prefer the old session-based authentication because it's simpler. Who cares if it's centralized? But I understand that we need to move on and we need to grow. But I'm like this. You'll find hard time convincing me because you have to explain why things exist. I just don't accept things as it is. All right. Ooh, we have so much chat, guys. You're active. حيا الله شباب. أحمد خضير هلا. Hey. Hey. Hello. Muhammad Salman. Hello. All right. What are your thoughts about NoSQL databases? They exist for a reason, and I think this is a valid reason, right? And the reason is, hey, my requirement as an application is consistently changing and developing, and it's completely changing all the time. And the cost of adding or altering the schema on the maintenance, on the database, on the downtime is something that I cannot afford. So can you give me a store that I can store virtually any column type without any structure, or we call it schemaless? And that attracts a lot of people, because most people, first of all, don't want to store the schema, because it's just a hassle to build a schema. It's not easy to build a schema. It requires a lot of skills to build a data model, and they just don't want to do that. Or the other part, which I am seeing a lot, is just people don't want to bother learning databases, and it's easier to move to NoSQL, and that's scary in my opinion. You don't move to something just because it's easy. You have to understand why you're moving into it. Because if you move to a NoSQL and your requirement actually requires a schema, you shot yourself in the foot, essentially, right? Because how would you configure? How would you scale? How would you? What about the certain situations that you actually need a schema, well-defined schema, right? That there are some stuff that the SQL databases give you that NoSQL do not. I mean, if you look at the current NoSQL developed, it went the other direction completely. Now they support full ACID. I can't tell a difference between ACID, SQL and NoSQL. So my statement might be false in my opinion. So who knows? I need to dig deep into NoSQL. I don't have a lot of experience in NoSQL. I use some of it, but most of the time I work with schema, because I didn't face a situation where I needed to change my schema all the time. And you guys came in with great use cases for NoSQL, which absolutely convinced me. And one of them was, hey Hussein, I sometimes I want to add a new column, right? Or a new property for a user, but I don't want to update my entire stack to add that property. It's just a stupid JSON extra information. It might exist, it might not. Why would you add an optional column, right? And make it take some space just for you to add that extra information. So NoSQL came into existence, and it was really convincing. So that's is MongoDB faster than MySQL? That's a very general question. I cannot answer that. I would say it's a false statement. What does it mean by fast? Is it fast in writing? If it's fast in querying? Is it fast in reading? Is it fast in the actual execution of the execution engine, analysis of the execution engine? Is it fast in? Is it better in replication between the nodes itself? What does it mean to be fast? It might be fast in certain situation, but not always the others. Okay? Should we send HTML from backend? Is it a good practice? Akash Joshi says. Should we send HTML from the backend? I mean, that's what every website does. It always sends HTML, right? When you first visit a site, you do a GET request, you get back in HTML. Now, I just made a video about Apple yesterday, my series, which I absolutely love, and you guys seems to like dev tooling the websites, right? So I dev tooled the Apple yesterday, and the first thing I do is I make a request to the index.html, which pulls the, not necessarily index, It pulls the HTML page, and once it pulls the HTML page, it turns around and makes further requests. So I don't see anything wrong with that. I understand that the recent unfortunate era that we live in, anything that is just being used and hard and tried is labeled as old or dated or traditional or not cool anymore. And that's a big problem, guys. It's a big problem. If something works, you should keep using it. If something works and you don't find any problem with it, you should keep using it. It's simple, works, keep using it. If you find a problem with it or a set of problems, this is the time where you build a new technology to solve this problem. That's what everybody does in the real engineering world, right? You find a limitation in this technology, and then you build a new technology. Look at HTTP. They built HTTP 1, then fixed it with HTTP 1.1, then found a little bit of problems. Then they fixed it in HTTP 2. Could they have guessed that from the beginning, 1995? Oh, by the way, our website in the future, they're going to request 100,000 requests per for every page. So HTTP 1 will not be a good idea because it's a single TCP connection and we're closing and opening all the time. So how about we actually build an idea of streams on top of TCP? Imagine this conversation having in 1995. That's just nuts. You can't possibly predict the future. So that you use what you have, you deploy it, and you work with it until it doesn't work anymore or you find a problem with it. Sending HTML is perfectly valid. What project did you enjoy making the most? Projects. What project did I enjoy making the most? I enjoy working on things that are related to the databases. I mean, I can't talk much about what I'm working at work, just for confidentiality reasons, especially with work with defense and stuff like that in Israel. But as in general, I build tools that work with the database directly, right? And collect logs and monitor the entire stack, find where the bottlenecks is, and write it into the database so that it can be queried and analyzed in a nice way, and it's very productive way. So I can find exactly where the bottleneck is. That's the goal of what I've been doing. So I've been working on many projects like that. So that kind of increases my skills on databases. I just learned the common table expressions, which is CTE. So I recently learned them, and this is a great addition to the database's SQL language. Is it possible to implement advanced full search feature using Postgres full search extension? I think so, yeah. So like you can, when you create a string column, right? That string column, you can store up to, I think, 1 GB in it in Postgres. We talked about toast and all that stuff. Yeah, it's an external table, but once you have that, you can add an index on top of that. And when you index that column, what you can do is, when you index it raw like that, you have to nail exactly what is the character inside it, which is almost useless, right? So that's why you have to create a gist index, which is GIST. I forgot what it stands for, right? Or a full text index. And when you do enable full text capability, you can essentially search for things that look like it. Like, let's say you want to search for tree, but you misspelled tree to triple E, for example. It will find that essentially with an actual index that is literally text the text and search for it. You can't find that, right? Even with a like, if you do like, that will cause a full table scan. So you have to create an index with full search capability. So yeah, Postgres support that as an extension, I believe. Is MySQL or Microsoft SQL still relevant, or should I switch to still relevant? Microsoft SQL is a big thing, dude. Or do that. Yeah, it is really huge. A lot of people use it. It's one of the oldest databases, and I use it on a daily basis almost. So it's a big database. It has a lot of spatial capabilities. Have a has a powerful capabilities. There's a free version. There is a obviously the premium version. But yeah, you most of the time you can pick any of their databases based on what you're trying to do and become an expert in it, right? So Postgres, MySQL, uh, Microsoft SQL, they all do the same job, but it depends on your use case. Which one would you pick that satisfies your use case? And your use case might change all the time. Now, what happens to Uber, right? Uber picked Postgres, and they found that their particular workflow will just does not scale with Postgres because they were just doing crazy amount of indexes on the so many indexes, and Postgres just does not like that. And yeah, it creates a lot of write ahead logs, and as a result, replication becomes a headache. And that I made a video about that. It actually became popular. Who knows, huh? An article from 2016, I brought it back and I tried to understand, because when I read it back in 2016, I understand zero things. That's back to our conversation of commodize, make software engineering a commodity, or democratizing software engineering. Because me, as someone who had, like, back then I had 10 years of experience, and I read this article and I don't understand anything. Is it something wrong with me, or is or which was that's the case, wasn't wrong with me, right? I lacked basic fundamentals in these things. So I wanted to say, I was like, okay, in 2015 I said, you know what, I want to become a better software engineer. I really need to. So that means any article I read, I want to understand it from now on. Any blog from these big companies, I want to understand it. That's my goal, right? And I was so jealous from people tweeting and retweeting these. I was like, God, man, everybody seems to understand this thing except me. Apparently, nobody did. But people just sometimes just tweet things without actually understanding, right? But even if you discuss it, even if you go to a podcast and they talk in depth, still, there is so much information that is missed. And my goal was, I want to unfold and understand. I want to become better. And I want to share this knowledge and make democratize this field and make it a little bit more accessible for everyone. And I think it's working. I think a lot of people says, "Hey, I OSI model, for example, one of the oldest thing that I just did not understand in school. I did not understand at work. And no, we didn't talk about it at work at all. But this is something that we studied in 2001." And I literally didn't understand why it exists. So when I came back, Steve Gibson actually has the host of Security Now. He's a great explainer, by the way. This is one of the few who actually explain things from the bottom of his heart and actually delivers, right? He's a great explainer. He takes his time. I love that. So I took that and says, okay, I really need to understand this thing, because why I'm watching all these videos, I don't understand anything. That was like back in whatever, when I made this video, 2017, 2018. So I went there and I started researching, and I took it all the way back to my experience, which is as a software engineer. It's like, why would the OSI model, the Open System Interconnectivity, whatever it stands for, relate to me as a software engineer or as a backend engineer? I said, wait a second, it does. Because to understand layer 7 proxying or layer 4 proxying, you better understand what OSI model is. Otherwise, you don't. So that's why all of this thing came together and say, okay, let me explain. Once I understood the OSI model, I said, okay, let me actually try to explain it. And people really, really relate to it a lot. Muhammad Osama, bro, hope you're good and your family. Thank you. You talked about imposter syndrome. I had an issue of building the trust of my skill gradually, regardless. I'm giving a great effort. All the best to you, Muhammad. And just make sure that have a criticism to yourself it's healthy to have a criticism to yourself. It's always good to criticize yourself, right? And say, okay, I really don't understand how Wi-Fi sends the packets in the air as radio packets. I don't understand that, right? So if you admit to that, your skill, which is over here, will gradually try to understand. You will start learning because you have a goal, right? I want to understand this. Because first of all, the first goal is admit that you are weak in this area. You're not weak, and you also admit that you're strong in other areas, and that's absolutely fine, right? So admit these weaknesses, right? For example, I know that I'm very good in communication protocol. I'm very good in web servers. I know exactly what web servers are doing. I know exactly what proxies are doing. I can get better, of course. But once you have that, you can start bridging that gap, slowly bridging that gap, and understanding, and start learning. And when you start doing that, you will stumble upon things that you understand and some things that you don't understand, which kicks off a new branch. It's like almost like depth first search, and we'll say, okay, I don't understand this, and you start the cycle again. This is called collateral knowledge. So as a result of pursuing one goal, you end up learning so many other things in the same time. Ooh. Hello, Hussein. Could you make a video about operating system stuff, processes, threads, semaphores? Ooh, you're taking me back. I will. I will definitely will. I'm planning to read the Linux book and then just understand how Linux work and all that stuff. And then when I absolutely nail it, I'll make a video about it, definitely. I know very little about processes, threads, and how operating system scheduler works. Very little, and I'm not afraid to admit that I don't know, because that kind of comes back to the imposter syndrome that we talked about. Just, yeah, if you don't know, you don't know, but have the willing to know. Any good recommendation to learn about Postgres? Recommendation like what? Postgres is a big thing, right? It's a big software. So if you really want to get into Postgres, just use it into a real application. Try to scale an application with multi-node Postgres. Try replication. Just replicate multiple nodes. Have a read replica and a write replica, and have your backend smart enough for using proxying to know which database to hit. If you're writing, hit this database. If you're reading, hit this database. Try that. And just by the fact of you trying that, you'll just get better and you start asking questions. Have you heard about looked on to MLS protocol? Why did I hear about this? MLS protocol. Messaging layer security? Huh. I have not. Thanks for sharing. I'll take a look at it. I'll definitely take a look at it. Thank you for sharing. I have not read about it. No. Do you use your knowledge of the database internal LSMB tree in your current job? Is only knowledge of DB API settings sufficient? Okay, so that's a good question. So Niels asked, I think you're asking me directly. Do I have my knowledge of the database, how persisted store in how it persists in the storage and the indexes specifically, and how does it affect my own job? I do actually, and I asked this question, but here's the thing: I didn't even reach that level, I didn't even need to reach that level because I'm working fixing the higher stack up, because the higher stack, there's so much to optimize over there. So optimizing the B tree versus LSM tree is so unimportant right now, and it will not give me enough performance boost compared to the things you can extract from just the backend, because the backend sometimes does stupid things. I mean, stupid. Me as a developer would write a code that is just dumb. I shouldn't have done it, right? Or For example, there are obvious things that I should use, like database server-side cursors, instead of executing the same statement over and over again. For paging, I could do a server-side cursor, execute it once, and then pull the information multiple times. This is, by the way, the paging problem in a stateless architecture is an absolutely difficult and hard problem to solve. You might say, what, Hussein? We do paging all the time. What are you talking about? It's the easiest thing. No, son. No, it's not. Remember, the HTTP is stateless, right? And that's one of the problems that of a ton of things that I want to solve, and I still don't have a solution to it, is if I make a request to pull the first 100 records, what does that mean? I'm a browser and I make a request, hey, pull the first 100 records from 0 to 100. That turns around and executes what? A SQL statement, right? And if I execute a SQL statement, that will do, hey, and this 100 million row, a table row, only give me the first 100 rows after executing that predicate filter, right? So you go through the indexes and you take the hit to do that query, to go through the index, to find all that stuff, only to pull the 100 rows. And then you give back the 100 rows, and then you serialize them with their protocol buffer, with their JSON, with their all that jazz. And then you take that piece and then you ship it to the client. And then the client says, okay, nice, give me the second 200 rows. What? Okay. Now HTTP will send that request. Now the backend will just pick up another database connection from the pool, which has nothing to do with the database connection you just used, because it's a stateless protocol. It has to keep cycling through the pool connection unless we figure out multiplexing on the backend with databases. That's another story. Hopefully Quick does that for us. But once we do that, we pick another connection which has nothing to do with the previous connection. So, hey, database, give me the rows from 100 to 200, right? And execute this query. So the database will go through the same work to execute the same query, to take the same hit, parses, all that jazz, execution plan, just to pull the next 200 queries. And doing it over and over again will absolutely, first of all, will exhaust your database. I'm not going to say kill it, but you can do better. In a client-server architecture, which before the web, in early 2005, 2006, most of the apps I developed was client-server. And this is the best because it's a stateful architecture. When my application starts, I say, loading. I'm going to just start a beautiful one single TCP connection, a database connection to the backend. And that's it, right? I'm going to send all my queries in this database connection. So I can optimize for that. I can definitely optimize. I can say, hey, if I do paging, that's the easier thing. I'm going to execute a single query. I'm going to say, hey, create a cursor instead. A cursor is just almost like a pointer. You execute it on the server side, and then that will just create a cursor on the backend and execute the query once. And we'll say, okay, I'm not going to fetch until you ask me. Now you say, hey, cursor, fetch the first 100. Boof. All right, then you say, fetch the next 100. Boof. It will just literally go do an IO and then pull it. It does not need to execute the query again. We don't have that in the web. The web is stateless, unfortunately. Hussein Ibrahim says, oh, same as me. Hussein, there are like thousands of ways to spelling the name Hussein, right? So Hussein Ibrahim, he pronounces like with Houssai, right? Some people pronounce it Hussain. Some people Hussain. Some people Hussein, like me. It's just like you'll see many variation in English, but in Arabic it's written always the same way. You cannot misspell the name Hussein in Arabic. That's what I like about the languages, right? It's fascinating to see that. So Hussein asks, where are you from? I am from Bahrain originally. That's where I was born, and I spent 30 years there, grew up there, and I moved to the States in 2015. 2050. Is that right in French? How do you actually practice around with scaling and maybe consequently distribute a system without actually having an app which has the need to scale? This is called elasticity, essentially. So the idea of elasticity, anglais is difficile. Anglais is difficile. Ego ga yoko hanashimasu. No. All right, sorry about that. So, elasticity is the ability, in Arabic we call it muruna, which means something that goes and then comes back, right? You just stretch it and then comes back. The idea here is how can your app scales up and scales down based on the load is extremely well-engineered problem. And Amazon does that. Cloud usually support that because that saves them money if they do that. And it saves you money if you do that, right? And you, as an on-premise system, to actually deploy this solution, you need a lot of intelligence in your reverse proxy, which is the guy or the gal that the first line of defense. You have to introduce logic there. Nginx Enterprise, by the way, has great the enterprise version. I don't believe the free version have that knowledge, but Nginx the enterprise version has these capabilities. Like it knows, oh, we're getting a lot of requests, let's scale up. Oh, we're getting less requests, maybe it's time to scale down. What's the purpose of spinning multiple backend instances and a load balancer on the same server machine? Because it will use the same CPU and RAM. 100 requests. Yeah, that's generally not a good idea. And if you're talking about machine as a physical machine, yeah, that's definitely not a good idea. In a production, in test, you can do whatever you want. But yeah, you're right. If you spin up multiple on the same machine, then it's not a good idea. What are your thoughts about multimodal DBs like Arogo and MarkLogic? I'm not aware about them, Marvel. Hope I pronounced your name right. I need to get that again. Google Translate. Arvel. Yuval. Sagron. I'm gonna start calling you Sagron. All right. What else? Is Dockerized version of a project has better performance or not? So we have to proceed with caution here. And I always try to explain that to people that Docker is just a process, right? It's not something fancy, really. Well, it is fancy. The idea of isolation in the operating system give you the illusion that this is a container, but what happens here is it's just a bunch of processes that runs in the same operating system. So let's take an example. So if you have a physical machine, forget about VMs, right? If you have a physical machine and you want to deploy two apps, one app require Node.js 8.5 and the second app require Node.js 13.5. Can you deploy it in the same machine? No, it's impossible. Why? Because a machine can only run Node.js as a process, as a software, can only install once. You cannot install it twice on the software, right? I'm not sure you can, but it's not possible, right? So people invented the idea of virtual machines. I said, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to spin up a completely virtualized operating system on top of this physical machine. So technically what we have is to have two operating system that gives the illusion of two operating system, but it's a one physical machine. So now all of a sudden now we can deploy on the first VM Node.js 8.5, and the second VM we deploy 13.5, and my apps will work normally because it's completely isolated, right? And this is done by the hypervisor, which kind of gives you that illusion. Technically, if you look at the process level, it's just processes running, right? There is a process that is almost the operating system, the virtual, and there is another process that's the second operating system. So people figure out them worked beautifully. This is great. But smart people, Google actually started that. It says, okay, why are we duplicating? Most of the time, the operating system layer is so thick, THICC, right? So thick. So you're putting a thick OS here and a thick OS here, and it's almost identical to the OS that you're on top. Why? Why? Pourquoi? Qu'est-ce que c'est? So people said, can we actually virtualize processes? Can I deploy my Node.js application as a process so that in its own bubble and all the collection of processes, so nobody can actually see this group of processes? And that were containers or C groups. Actually, there are many groups on the Linux operating system, and the idea of having a group of processes that are completely isolated and nobody can talk to each other, that was born. Docker was born from that idea. So your question was about Docker containers. Is it faster? I don't think so. It's faster. It's just, it depends on how much memory do you have on your original CPU machine, because that's a shared. The RAM CPU is shared with all those VMs, with all those containers regardless. So if your container is limited to what CPU uses and RAM, it's going to be slow, right? You better limit the container, right? And if you don't have enough memory or CPU on your physical machine, your Docker containers or your VMs will suffer as a result. The VMs, all the containers, will start to do paging, will try to use the disk instead of memory just to make the container works, but that will slow things down. So your question is very hard to answer. It really depends, which I hate that answer, I know. Serverless versus Dockerization for the future. Which one is the future? Abdul Mubin. That's a good question. I think serverless is a great technology. If we figured it out, then it will be a great technology. But I do not see it working on premise, in my opinion, because the cost of implementing serverless on premise, if we do, I might be wrong. Maybe we'll figure out a way to say, hey, here is 100 machine, and there will be a magical software. I don't believe it exists. Maybe Kubernetes with a mixture of, what was called? Phishing? I think it's called phishing, the server, no? Phishing. The serverless architecture on top of Kubernetes. So that will do. I said, okay, I just want to install this software, and it will treat these 100 machines that are on the same network as just a hunk of metal. And then you talk to one endpoint, and it will use this hunk of machines without any configuration. If that made really, really easy, then I do see it the future, and I think it will, because developers will rely on this infrastructure better and better, and as it gets better and better, we're gonna need more people on the back end to manage this infrastructure, because it's not gonna be free without bugs, obviously. So yeah, I see serverless existing in the future. I see Dockerization still existing, because those two are orthogonal, right? Serverless will use Docker containers, I guess use Docker containers, or just containers in general, to spin up an instance to execute, right? I don't see why not. And it can use a physical machine, it can use any other machine. Big fan from India. Harshal, welcome to the channel. Thank you for your message. Where DB store insert or update query data before commit. It stores it in something called, so the question surundam says, where does the DB stores the insert update queries before it actually commits it? Because when you start a transaction, you do insert update, insert update, insert update, insert update, and then you do the commit. If you fail in between, how do we know that, hey, this is failure, so we have to roll back this garbage that we just inserted, right? It is stored in something called the write ahead log, which is WAL, W-A-L, WAL. Wally. So it's stored in a wall. It's a beautiful wall. Tremendous, beautiful wall. It's a big wall. It's not really big. It's just, the write ahead log, usually it's both in memory and also it's flushed to disk so we don't lose information, right? And the wall changes are read by the same transaction itself, right? Because if I write something and I turn around and read it, I should be able to read it, right? I'm talking about before committing it to the database. If I write something, I start in the transaction, I insert a new record, and if I turn around and try to read that record, it better be there, right? Because I just inserted it. Yeah, I did not commit it, but I should be able to read it. However, other transactions here, can you guys see? Right here, if they try to read that record, to them, that record does not exist. If they were able to read that dirty record, that's called a read uncommitted, read isolation. So you just read a dirty read. That's called a dirty read. You read something you're not supposed to read. So some data SQL Server actually supports that read uncommitted. You can enable that if you want to, so to read stuff. And I used it sometime to see if things are working or not. Not generally a good idea, but I just use it for testing. So if you do that, then you start reading, your transaction only makes that visible, essentially. But if once you commit, that wall changes, goes to the desk. Also, while you're writing, actually, it goes to the desk, right? But once you write, it actually makes that row in the heap visible to all transactions. Hey, we just committed. That means it's good. It's actually committed. You actually write to the block in the disk that says row 17, which you just inserted, is live. People can read it. And here's where it gets tricky, right? Now, if you started a transaction before the row has been committed, right, and your isolation level is read committed, you will be able to read that because you can read anything that has been committed. If your isolation level is repeatable read, I think that's what it's called, repeatable read, then, or serializable, or for the multi-version concurrency control, you will not be able to read that because your transaction says, hey, I only read stuff at that moment of starting the day of that transaction. Anything that commits after, I do not want to read it. And some people do that to guarantee consistency. Like, let's say you're generating a sales report, right? You're doing a select statement, you're doing all the product sales, right? And in the middle of you're querying all that. You queried all the product and you got 10 products sales, right? So that's what, I don't know, $100. And in the middle, someone inserted a new sales. And then you turn around and you do the sum. For example, oh, how many products did I just, what is the total of that? If you read that again and you say, hey, give me the sum of that product sales, you're going to get 110, which does not match what you just read. Why? Because you just read something someone inserted in the middle of the transaction. And that's isolation level is called read committed. So most of the time it works. Sometimes it does not, like this situation. Sorry if I take a long time to answer. I always babble a lot. How do you secret credential DB credentials serverless via code? I mean, deep database credentials should be stored on the same machine and should be you generate it so that no possible human can possibly get that database, right? Credential, the password, right? That's the first thing. And then you put it, you store it somewhere safe in either a store in the what's it called, vault, right? That's what the fanciest word now for it. Or you can just store it on disk, shared drive that is secure on the back end, and then you can read it, and then you supply it through environmental variables, right? So .env, right, is a good idea. You can store it in the .env as long as you don't push that .env file to your GitHub repository or to your repository. If you do, obviously people can see that password. Even that, I am a pragmatic man, right? If you accidentally post your your database Postgres password, I don't see that as a big deal. Some people do. I don't. Why? Because you should, if you are a good backend engineer, you should have prevented the access to your backend database to limited IP addresses. What happened? To a limited IP addresses. So no one from external can possibly know to access your database anyway. I know this is controversial, I know, but always don't freak out before you think. That's what I was always saying. But that doesn't mean you should go ahead and publish all your passwords. Just think, right? If you keep thinking, then you're invincible, because now you understand how things work. You're just not freaking out because of the sake of freaking out, right? Obviously, if you expose your Postgres, you're screwed. Which technologies has good future? A lot of people ask these questions, like technologies that has good future. We don't know the future, my man. We don't know the future. But I would say the Web Transport Protocol and the Quick Protocol is going to change the game, especially when people start applying it to multiplexing technologies such as databases. Like once you start, like what is the biggest problem with databases when it comes to web infrastructure? Pooling, right? Connection pooling is the worst. You have to establish like a lot of connections, and then you have to only send that query to one TCP connection at a time. You cannot use, that's a bad idea by the way, don't use a single TCP connection, database connection, to send parallel requests on the same time from different web clients. That's a recipe for disaster. It might work for you, but as you go, because you cannot guarantee the response. The TCP stack will just respond, right? And when you respond, you will get the response for the first query might be shuffled, and because it depends on like how the database actually received it, and what's the first response will be written. The first response that will be written is not necessarily the first query that the database got. It might write the second response first, and then the first response. If you do that, if you assume that the first response that you get is actually the first query, you might accidentally just responded to web 1, to user web 1 with web 2's client data, which is disastrous. That's the same problem with pipelining and HTTP. That's the exact same problem with HTTP, and why they invented HTTP pipelining, which failed miserably. Now they went to the route of HTTP 2, which is streams, and now we need to bring all the databases up to speed, the communication protocol with the HTTP stack, not necessarily as an HTTP protocol, but the idea of streams, which Quick implement beautifully. Unfortunately, the database in the backend stuck with pooling for now. I am a junior Java. Does whatever I'm saying make sense, guys? Does it make sense, or I'm just babbling? Tell me if I'm just saying stuff that doesn't make any sense, because I'll be happy to elaborate. Just say make sense, or just say elaborate, please. You suck, and do type you suck. Which technologies have good future? We just answered that. I am a junior Java developer. I knew about this channel due to the protocol videos. Ah, welcome. How important is it for developers to know about these protocol? You're talking about the developer. I mean, a developer is a little bit isolated from an engineer, in my opinion. Everything I say in here, in my opinion, right? So a developer usually write code, right? And the developers sometimes need to communicate with other backends or other services. So I would say, absolutely yes, developers should understand protocols. Yes, 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 yes. Well, that was a good comment. Your accent sounds like a colleague of mine. Which are you from? Which are you from? I'm from Bahrain. Yeah, so I have an Arabic accent. So maybe that's why. Thanks in advance. Thanks, Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee in the town, dude. Coming back from the dead. Still giving us knowledge. How to keep yourself motivated after work time? By motivated, I mean that reading tech books, learning. That's a good question, Miqdad. Miqdad says, how to keep yourself motivated, my friend. Okay, so, yeah, Miqdad, motivation is very hard, to be honest, right? You're looking at this, and then you're looking at my knowledge, you're looking at my video and says, okay, this guy's on 24/7. No, I feel down all the time. I don't try to make myself motivated. Right? If I'm not feeling like I'm reading about the Babelfish Amazon new technology or MariaDB new tech, I just don't, because otherwise I'll be continuously struggling with my mental illness in this case. Like, wow, this is all the time. It's like I have to be on and on and on and learning. No, I take breaks all the time. I do things that I consider fun. I play video games. Mind you, I play stressful video games like Dark Souls because they give me motivation. Motivation just make me feel good about achieving something. When I spend an hour trying to defeat a boss, it just feels good when you do. I watch anime. I watch things that I like. I watch guilty pleasure YouTube videos. Yeah. I say flip the questions, like give yourself some time to learn and give yourself sometimes to not learn. So to me, learning comes by desire, not like, oh, I have to learn this. Oh my God. Not like that. So like I wake up in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, well, the first thing I say, I'm drinking my coffee and I'm reading about, what was I reading about this morning? About MySQL database engine, the new MySQL database engine, like random Twitter stuff, which is not healthy if you ask me. But if I see something interesting, I immediately try to read it. I find some idea, I get some ideas from it, and I write it in my notebook so that I can make a video on it. If I don't feel like it, I always find the time to do things that I like. How do you rate GraphQL out of 10? My God, that's a very political question, Kumar. We're trying to get us into a civil war here. GraphQL, bringing GraphQL. I'm kidding. So GraphQL out of 10? Sheesh. I'll give it 6.5. Sorry. It's a good technology, but I think it could be made better. I think we're abusing it. A lot of people use GraphQL without database knowledge, and that's the problem. If you use GraphQL and you absolutely have polished database knowledge, knock yourself out. But the reason GraphQL was invented is for simplicity. Back to my original statement when I make developers prefer simplicity over understanding, let's say, just to make things work. And when they do that, they suffer as a result of ambiguity, right? Because if you go through this route, which is easy, you just implement it. If something went wrong in the easy route, guess what? you're screwed because you have no idea how things work, because you chose the easy route, which magically abstract everything away, and all of a sudden you have no clue what's going on because you do not understand how the stack works. That's why every time I tell people, please do understand every tech stack that you use. Fully understand it. Fully understand React. If you're going to use React, understand how React works. Don't just use it. If you want to use GraphQL, use it, but understand how exactly it's forming your query on the backend. Understand that it's a post-only model and it cannot support caching, web caching, that is. Understand that it can screw your database if you're doing something wrong on the backend, because it does magic. And what don't we like in this channel? We do not like magic. We do not like magic. I'm going to make a shirt. We do not like magic. I've said it so many times. Somebody told me that SSH tunneling is an end. Oh, wow. I can't read anything. This chat is... the YouTube chat is so weird. NAT translate its private IP to public IP to send a request to destination IP. But how server translate the destination IP to a specific private IP? Well, first, the server does not translate the destination IP. The router does, right? Here's what happens with NAT. NAT to this. We're going to explain natto desu ka. So natto, which is Japanese for nat. Just kidding, by the way, guys. Sometimes if I tell a joke, especially at work, some people just look at me. It's like, are you serious or are you joking? Because they don't know if I joke or not. So I'm still working on my sarcasm. So natto is because we cannot generate enough unique IP address, public IP addresses for the whole devices, right? Because we have like a 4 billion limit, I believe, with the IPv4. We had to create the idea of subnetworks, right? So you have a subnet, and these have like a private IP addresses, and you guys can talk to each other as much as you want, right? But if you want to talk to an external network, we cannot use your IP address to talk to the external network because you don't have the guts to talk to external network. You're just naked to the external network with the private IP address. Just doesn't make sense. So what we do is this internal network have something called the gateway. The gateway is the device that is capable of talking to outside networks. And by outside network, I mean internet or just another network, right? So every device, if you go to your Wi-Fi on your phone now, what time is it now? I hate the new operating system, dude. I hate this new OS. What is this? Mac, I forgot what it's called. It's so ugly. Big Sur. It flipped everything. I don't know where is the clock, for God's sake. So it's 8 o'clock. What are we talking about? Yeah. So these devices, if you go to your phone now and you go to Wi-Fi, and there's always something called the gateway, where it says, hey, gateway is, if you don't know where to send something, send it to the gateway. So if your IP address, a private IP address is 10.0.0.2 and your neighbor is 10.0.0.3 and then your laptop is 10.0.0.4, you can send a message from 10.0.0.4 and 10.0.0.2 normally without the gateway being involved, in this case the router. You can send information just normal. You can send a GET request to a web server that is running locally. Totally fine. But if you send a request to google.com, a GET request to google.com, which I definitely have a public IP address outside your network, you're going to do a DNS, it comes back with IP, I don't know, 4.3.2.1, right? And if you send that, it says, oh, 4.3.2.1, this is definitely not on my subnet. Why? Because you do this mask. You do a subnet mask, it says 10.0.0, mine mask is 255.255. If I end them, 4 is not in my subnet, so I cannot talk to this guy. What's my gateway? Gateway, help. So you send the packet to the gateway instead. So the gateway says, okay, you're destined this to me as a MAC address, as a layer 2. You send it to the gateway, but the gateway knows Oh, you actually want to go to 4.0.3.2.1 and you're private. Sorry, I can't get you there. I actually have a public IP address that I can talk to these guys because I know how to talk to these guys. And if this gateway doesn't understand, if it's not in the same subnet, if this thing is not in the same subnet as the gateway, it does the exact same thing that we did. What's the gateway's gateway? And you send it to the gateway. What's the gateway's gateway? What's the gateway's gateway? That's how internet works. You can just send it. And when you do that, the first device actually adds an entry that, by the way, I actually had to change the packet from the private IP to my public IP. And you add an entry, a row in a database somewhere in the router. And then when the packet comes back and that is destined for the gateway and there is a destination port, the router looks, oh, okay, let me look in the NAT. Is this for anyone? You literally look with the source IP, a destination IP, and the gateway IP and says, okay, where is this destined from? Definitely not for me because nobody talks to the gateway as a final destination. It doesn't have anything except the router's admin page. So it goes there and says, okay, this is 10.0.02. They requested that stuff. Okay, let me shift that packet, replace it, send it back. So that's how NAT works. Let's make the app. How long it take to watch all of this video and all the videos on your channel? I have no idea. I've been making videos since 2016, 2015. There's a lot of videos. So don't expect to watch all of the videos. Whenever you want to learn something, watch it and take your time. It's going to take a long time. There is a lot of content. You don't have to watch all of it, definitely. But thank you. Every time you watch the content, you support the channel because you tell YouTube that this idiot is actually worth watching, right? Because he has something to say. And the longer you watch, the more YouTube gets interested, the more YouTube start pushing my channel, which is started to do these days. I'm started getting 10 million impressions, which is an insane number of impressions. Impressions is how many times the YouTube shows your video to people. And it's just nuts. And it's just, I'm seeing growth, and I appreciate every single one of you that watches the content because that supports the channel. So thank you so much. Hi Hussein, YouTube on everything. Hi Hussein, your channel is the only channel I found till now which explains really complex backend stuff from beginner point of view. That's what I'm trying to do. Thank you so much. YouTube on everything. That's what I try to do. I take complex topic and I try to make it commoditize and kind of democratize it so it's easy to digest. Not just for you guys, for me even. Because essentially, I want to learn, right? That's the goal. Big Sur. I hate Big Sur too. I am on Catalina still. Stay on Catalina. Don't move to Big Sur. Robbie says, he's asking a question in Arabic, so I'm going to read it and then translate it and then answer it. حسين كيف حالك؟ في قاعدة البيانات ما هي الحالات التي يجب أن أستخدم فيها index في الأعمدة؟ جاوب في الإنجليزي مشكلة. So the question Robbie asks is, what's the use case where I should use an index on a column in a database? All right, should I always use an index or should I not use an index? So the rule of thumb is usually if you're querying with a predicate filter on that column, usually you should have an index. However, if that's the only field you're querying, if you're querying multiple fields, then think about the order on which you're querying these fields, right? So let's say select star is a bad idea. Select name from employees where first name is equal Ali and second name is equal Rick. Ali Rick. Wow. Okay. So if you do that, then the first thing that comes to mind, I'm going to add an index to both. Not necessarily. You don't need an index on both. Because think about it. What is the most common name? Are last names more common than first name, or first name are more common than last names? You add to one and measure the performance. Just one. Because once you query once, you're going to have a limited set of rows to work with anyway. And when you have this limited set of rows, you might not need an index. In fact, the database might not even use your index at all. My dog is barking. Paisley, quiet. All right. So yeah, so it really depends what you're trying to do with the indexes and what are the queries. So I would say, test, try, and see the performance essentially, and then try adding indexes when needed. All right, guys, we're gonna take a quick break. Let me see what's up with my dog, and we'll be right back after this short break. Stay on. All right, we are back. So here's the thing. So he's been the FedEx car is here. So whenever he sees a noise, he's trying to protect us, right? So he's like a little pug. So he's just like barking all tough. Trying to protect us. It's so cute. It's like, what are you protecting us from? But it's so cute that he's also feel protective of us. I don't know if I answered this question, but are you planning to make a video about Postgres full text search? Yeah, will do very soon. Here's the thing. I did not build an application where I needed full text. That's why I don't have experience in that, right? I usually talk about stuff that I am experienced with. What did I miss? How can we convince you to be on Instagram? YouTube notification don't really help. I had no clue you were live until I opened YouTube. Really? Oh, that sucks. So you guys use Instagram a lot? Yeah, okay, follow me on Instagram. I'll be active if I see some comments. My Instagram is HNASR is exactly as Twitter, but I don't post software engineering stuff there. Maybe I should. Let me know if you guys want this stuff. If you want on Instagram, I'll just post everywhere, I guess. From where to learn microservices in Node.js? Just do it. Really. I mean, microservices is just a very overblown word, in my opinion. I swear. Just what's a microservice? It's a service, which is a web server that spins up and listens on a port, and you receive information. You receive a request, whether this is a request on HTTP or other protocols, and then it responds. It just happened to be a little bit thinner. So Node.js, what microservice is a service, right? And I'm just, man, a lot of people just blow things out of proportion and making things very hard. You're such a lovely guy. Thank you. Bring the duck to the stream. Maybe I will. Yes, on Insta. Everybody wants Insta. How to master Django? I know little about Django. So I would say to know anything, let's just start using it. And I don't like Python as a language, so I don't use it as much as JavaScript. But that's why you see me use Node.js or Express on instead of Django, for example. It's just they both do the exact same job. Pick something, and I don't have interest in spreading my knowledge into both languages, in my opinion, because I code in Python, not on a daily basis, on a weekly basis at my job. But most of the time, if I want to learn a language, JavaScript is just very quick and dirty to do stuff, right? But I'm trying to learn Go now because it's hip. It is very hip. Do you drop your Insta ID here, please? Can't find it by HNSR. Really? That was my ID. HNSR is my Instagram ID. You couldn't find it? That's weirdo. Weirdo this. That's my Instagram. HNASR. That's my ID. That's weirdo. Just at HNASR. What technology are you mostly working with when coding? When coding. C#. I mean, the language is C#. I work with the following. Stacks. I work with the languages I use are the following, and by no mean don't think that these are the best languages at all. There's no. It's just that I just happen to use them because I have to work with them. C#, VB.NET, JavaScript, Python. Can you say Python? What else? That's it. That's the 4 languages I work on a daily basis. Languages. Backend technologies. Nginx, HA proxy. A custom reverse proxy. Our own custom homegrown reverse proxy. In Esri. And also Tomcat. That's technically a web server. Tomcat, I work a lot with Tomcat, and you might see my tweets with Tomcatto. Hey, someone actually found my Instagram. There you go. Instagram.com. Yeah. So, what else? What else I work with? Databases. Yes, database stacks. What databases I work with? I work with Oracle, 10G and 12C. I'm trying now to deploy 19B or 19C. Their naming is so weird, Oracle. What else? I work with Postgres, all versions. I started working with Postgres since 9.4, and I deployed 9.5 and 9.6, and after 9.6 there was no 9.7. Immediately they went to 10, and then 11, and then 12. I believe I'm working on 13 now. I don't think I deployed 13. SQL Server. I work on SQL Server on a daily basis. 2020. I forgot their names, man. Their SQL Server is also another weird thing. 2000 and I think 2006. Was it 2006? Dude, I forget, man. The versioning is just like it blurs away. I think 2016, 2014, that was like a bad release, I think. 2016, and I think on 2016. I am on 2016. Maybe there is a 2019 now. I know 2017. I'm not sure. What else? SAP HANA. That's another proprietary database, and our own file-based database system. Oh, SQLite. I work with SQLite a lot, and we built on Esri. We built a custom, our own file-based database called File GDB, and now we have another thing on top of SQLite, which we call the Mobile GDB. That's it. So yeah, I play. There's like a lot of server stack. We call it ArcGIS server, enterprise, all that stuff. So yeah, I work with so many technologies. Hussein, just started watching your channel. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Really cool content. Thank you, Sabham. Appreciate you, my friend. Why go? Why not Rust? No reason at all. I want to go to Rust. It's just no particular reason. I'm interested in Rust as well. Maybe I'll go to Rust or Go. I heard that Go is just easier for networking, was designed to build for networking, so I think it's a good back-end language. So might consider Rust. I mean, I'm considering a lot of language. I want to go back to C++, in my opinion, or C. Just don't have time. Sorry, mistake. Found it. Okay, got it. Faye found the Instagram. I see PlayStation in the back. What do you play? I play mostly the following games in the PlayStation. I play most of the time the games that I overplay all the time. Skyrim. I don't know which one it is. The popular Skyrim that's everywhere. Right, the Elder Scrolls. I play Sekiro. I play Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne. All of these games I played it at least twice. Full through. I'm not counting the twice I say from scratch, right? I'm not counting New Game Plus, Game Plus. These are I don't count them as games. I just play them. So if you count those, I play them maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Sekiro, I reached up to New Game Plus 6, and I made it into 100% plat and all that. These kind of the games I like playing. I love this game. I like other games like Red Dead Redemption, God of War. So yeah, I play from time to time. I watch anime. Like to do some entertainment from time to time. I think even you, as an engineer, you should not make your engineer as like full time. Maybe if you're passionately about it, it's just like you drink. I allocate a lot of time for my engineering to build my engineering skills all the time. Is SSH tunneling the most secure way for admin access to the database? PG admin. Example PG admin. I see other options such as limiting IP address as separate SSL encryption alternative. So Nicholas asks to access a backend service like such as BD admin. Right, PG admin is a web server technically that listens to a port and then facing directly with the database. So it's a very critical piece of infrastructure that you should not really expose to the public, right? That being said, if you how else would you access your PG admin? So you can either remote into, you just SSH into a machine normally, right? And then using SSH into that machine, open the PG admin from there, right? I guess you cannot really open a user interface from SSH, huh? But what you do essentially is, if you're on Windows, you remote into that desktop machine through VPN, and then from that remote machine, you open PG admin. So that's one way, right? So through VPN. It's a little bit slow, but not really that slow, but that's one way. The second way is what Nicholas suggested is do an SSH tunnel between you and some machine there, and then just transfer the content, the web server to there. So it's like a reverse tunneling, which I talked about many times on this channel. That's another way to do that. If you're authenticated, that should work. Another way is just to limit pgadmin exposure to the public to a certain IP addresses, so that make it into a public interface, which is really worries me in my opinion. Really worries me how that thing. I would not do that. I mean, yeah, definitely. If you expose that IP address, you allow only an external IP address to access you. That works. But I'm worried about spoofing. Like if someone managed to spoof your IP address, they will be able to. If they know which IP address is granted, and this is like open to the public, they might be able to spoof that IP address. I know it's not that easy, but it just worries me that to expose pgadmin. I'd rather just make it internal, and when I really want to go into the administer my database, I'll just VPN into my network and then access from there. That's just the safest way. Istamar ya akhi. Zero Cash says, go on, my brother. Thank you, my dear. Will do. Lots of love from Nigeria. Do you know the country? Of course I do. Say Biko means that thank you in my language. Biko. Thank you. Do you use Vim? Yes, all the time. I like Vim. I had to always search. I like how to search in Vim is I always forget how. I know to search, you do slash. For example, let's say you want to search for HTTP, right? You do that. That's it. You do Vim, then you do test.txt, and then you do, once you do slash, you immediately go into search mode, right? And if you do slash HTTP, you will go to the first HTTP occurrence. And then I always forget what is the next, how to go next and previous. So it's N or P. So I always had to Google that. That means I don't use it as much, but oh well. I don't use the find next feature as much, but if I want to edit, it's just the simplest thing. Adarsh say, I remember you talking about DB user per endpoint. How do you manage automate this? Oh yeah, so I talked about that a little bit. I mean, that's an over-engineered solution if you think about it, and I said it in the video, but it is like one of the best practices, right? I know best practices is like a little bit weird with over-engineering, but it's just if you really want to do that, you have multiple endpoints, right? One endpoint will do a read, one endpoint will do a write to the database, one input will do a delete. And usually what people do is they will use a single database user to do all the three, right? And they will grant that database user on the back end full write permission, including create and everything. Sometimes we'll do crazy stuff like, oh, let the user create or drop a table, which is nuts. If you usually don't do DDL operations through endpoints, through web endpoints at all. It's just a bad idea. You can't do that, right? Plus, people are connecting. How do you have to do schema operation on the back end usually, unless you know what you're doing, right? That's a different story. But if the trick here is don't assign user permissions that they don't need as a database user. That's the first thing. And if you want to go take it further, which is the video I explain, let each endpoint have a specific user to do that permissions only. That's it, right? So if this is an endpoint that reads all the booking, then make it so you have a connection pool with that database user that only have read permission. So if someone managed to do a SQL injection using that GET request, they will not be able to drop a table. They will not be able to write. They will only be able to read. So you kind of limit the surface of attack this way. Yeah, it's much harder to implement, much harder to maintain, but it gives you really good security if you think about it. And that's one of the best in practice. Some people will say it's a little bit of over engineering, but security, sometimes security is really good. You have to over engineer a little bit. How Go routine works behind the scene. I don't know anything about Go, so I'm not sure. Go scheduler rule. Hi Hussein, what's your opinion on Elixir? Elixir, man. Elixir and what's the derivative from that? Forgot. Golang? Not Golang. That was gonna bother me. WhatsApp language. WhatsApp programming language. What programming language was WhatsApp written in? What language? Erlang. So Elixir came from Erlang, right? So Elixir came from Erlang, and it is one of the few languages that can swap code at runtime. I'd never seen any language that does that, and the ability to swap code at runtime is so powerful. I don't think I think I talked about it a little bit in the WhatsApp video. But ability is, imagine if you wrote code and you spin up the code, the processes, and all of a sudden you want to patch something. You fixed a bug, you fixed something, you want to change something. What do? You have to shut down these processes, and first of all you have to compile the code again. Not necessarily in JavaScript, but just any language that needs compilation. You have to compile and run it again, and then stop the existing processes and run this again. So this takes time, right? Stopping and restarting. Erlang is one of the languages that can do code swap. You guys say, this is running, this portion of the code, I changed it. You swap it at runtime. Magic. I don't know how it works. I really need to read more about it. But just this feature is powerful. Majid Super. I don't know what's your last name, dude. So I'm gonna read it in Arabic and then translate it. الباش مهندس محمد الشريف حيكون فرحان دلوقتي. خلي حضرتك تعمل لايف. Yeah. So he's saying that Muhammad Sharif, which is he's running another software engineering, the one I talked about, in the beginning of the stream, where he's from Okta. He's really expert in security and authentication. He is the one who actually had me in his podcast, and he encouraged me to do it live. So all the thanks to him, of course. The whole thanks to him. Thank you so much, Muhammad. Erlang. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Erlang. Yeah, I was always scared to do a live stream. I was like, what if something goes wrong? Of course, things all go wrong all the time. The dog was barking a second ago. I mean, things will go wrong all the time, but that does not mean I cannot give you value, my friend. Erlang. So Erlang. That's how you pronounce. What's your take on maximum number of concurrent connection on a web server? Problem like C10K and C100K. I forgot. I have to go back and read those problems. It's been a while. But there is a limit essentially to the TCP connection that you can open. Just because of most of the time these limits are memory and processing, right? When you open a connection from the client to the backend server, that's a TCP connection. So there is a physical thing that's stored on the server. It's called the file descriptor. That's what it's called. And then the client also have the same file descriptor. And when you create a connection, there are sequence numbers that kind of track the packets. Like, I just sent packet number 100. I just acknowledged packet number 101. Good. This is packet number 300. And imagine these packets are low level, right? Keep saying packets. They are segments. TCP segment. IP packets. MAC frames. Networking is hard. Try to remember all that stuff. So those segments are just segments, right? So if how many times when you open these connections, because the server operating system has to maintain these numbers, have to maintain this state. It's a stateful connection. So HTTP 1.1 made this actually worse. because of the limit where you can only send one request per TCP connection at a certain time, and we have a website filled with resources that we need to pull, and as a result, took a long time. So we can't use one single TCP connection. So people start, or browsers start opening multiple TCP connections, and that just increases the load. That's why HTTP 1.1 actually doubles the number of TCP connections on your backend, or even triples. It just blows up, especially if you're going from a browser. It's just a lot. And HTTP 2 is not that perfect as well, because HTTP 2 uses streams, and those streams need to be interpreted and broke down into actual meaningful layer 7 useful requests. And in order to do that, you need a lot of work. All right. MySQL PL sucks. I don't know about that. We have Japonais on the stream. What's your name? Google Translate. Anata wa Nihonjin desu. For the sake of a dream, that's what your name is. And ask, for the sake of dreams, ask, thank you for the answer on my comment. By the way, do you think will Elixir gain popularity? Yes. Yes. It is already popular, by the way. And I think, yeah. I don't know why it's not mainstream yet, like compared to a JavaScript, for example. Maybe it's just simplicity, right? How to clearly understand issues and handle them in back-end configuration files. In general, processing for debugging. So debugging on backend is one of the most tough jobs there. Datadog, I heard, I didn't see that myself, but I think you can implement Datadog, this service. Again, not sponsored or anything like that. It's just, I heard that you can deploy this magic, and all of a sudden, it will just know exactly where the bottleneck is. I don't know how it works. I'd like to learn more about it, in my opinion. Because if you can monitor where the bottlenecks are in the backend, especially if you had microservices, like a request that sends another request, that sends another request, that makes things really, really interesting. Kip says, how much your backend time do you spend on coding? Very low. I barely code. I barely write any code. I'm an engineer. My job, so for those who don't know, I'm a principal engineer. That means I own a product or a collection of products. So I'm responsible for launching the product. First of all, I'm responsible of coming up with the requirement for the product, right? Talking to customers, designing the product, actually creating the issues and in the backlog. I'm talking about backlog issues, right? And then distributing the work with for the developers who actually write the code, which I don't write the software code, and then come back and test the software, write a test plan, make sure it works, and then ship the product, talk to customers, and communicate through videos for communication, blogs, talk about how this product works. I'm responsible for all these stages in the development. Obviously, I have a big team with me for each product that we ship. So that's my job. So sometimes during this, I take some of my time to work on the back end, because most of our apps that we build are back-end apps, most of them, right? And when we do back-end apps, the architecture is everything. You have to build a solid, bulletproof architecture. And that's where my job comes in, from the design. Which queue system works best for low latency system, like, for example, sending, trades, or trading engine? I mean, Redis is a good queue system. I mean, people on Redis will be mad if they heard that. I think it's a pub subsystem. But yeah, RabbitMQ is good. Redis is good. If you want low-level control, go with ZeroMQ. That's good. Do you think that Rust can replace C++ in the future? I cannot answer that. I think Rust was created to solve limitation, not necessarily limitation, I'll just try to make memory allocation better through detection of this possible memory leak during compile time. I think that's one of the biggest sell point for Rust. Will it replace C++? I don't know, because I didn't test Rust, and I'm not sure that it will, because there are like a big, there's C++ is huge. I mean, it's been there for years and years and years, so I really doubt that it's going to be replaced at all. All right, guys, we're gonna start rolling it out. Reaching 2 hours. I think it's time to wind down. And next time I'll do better, guys. I'll send out a notification everywhere so you guys can see it. I didn't send. Usually I send it on Twitter, so follow me on Twitter. Usually I tweet a lot, and yeah, let's start winding this down. Asking few more questions before ending the stream. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys. Appreciate you. Thank you for everyone taking the time to come here and listen to me babble. Hello, Hussein. What's the best architecture, network, technology, I read that topology for some reason, to build an application that does video streaming at low bandwidth? How would you do that? So low bandwidth video streaming app. So what you need to do is think about the source of video stream itself. So it really depends. Do you have these videos built in, or are they live streamed? That's a different question, right? If you have those videos actually built and uploaded ready for you, then you have to create multiple versions of the videos. So you have to create like a low resolution video, higher resolution, higher, and so that's what YouTube does. And based on the client that start to consume, you serve it the right version of the video in order to limit them, to kind of have as lower bandwidth as possible, right? So that's the first thing. The second approach we can do in the communication protocol, which by the way, HLS, which is HTTP streaming. You do HTTP streaming with partial content. So you can request the content to be delivered to you in segments, in partial. So this is done through the 206 status code in HTTP. So you send one request, and the application, the server will start almost just very close to SSE, server-side events, where we'll just stream the content to you slowly, trickling down. So that will just minimize the bandwidth as well, because you're not just gonna do polling. Hey, do I have something? Do I have something? Do I have something? It's gonna be streamed to you, and then the bandwidth will really depends. The higher bandwidth, the better, obviously. But I don't think you can do much. Compression is done through the video itself, so I don't think you can do much about that. Maybe I'm wrong. I have a server with 32 gig RAM, 16 core processor, and it can't handle more than 70 users at a time. I would be really surprised. I would ask what is on that stack, what's on the server, how many nodes do you have, like what does each request actually do. Ask about this kind of stuff. I think you can do so much. If your application is expensive by nature and you think that, hey, I cannot optimize more, I think I only handle 70 user, then that's fine. But if you take a look at your architecture and think, okay, what does it mean to handle 70 user at a time? You mean concurrently in this time, right? And does it mean 70 users are sending the same heavy request at a single time? Can you make that atomic request faster? Can you make it take less resources? Can you add a caching layer that will improve that performance of that request serving? And when I say caching layer, I'm not talking about Redis or anything like that. Caching in the app itself, whether it's in-memory cache or a sidecar cache. I talk about sidecar if you want to learn about that. So a sidecar cache where it stores this information. So it's in the same machine, but it's local. to you, so you don't have to jump outside the network. So guys, all right, I think we'll end it here. Thank you so much. Yahya says, are you an application engineer? No, I am a principal engineer. So I'm not responsible for just one application. I'm responsible for a product which can contain many applications. Let's put it this way, as I explained. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you all. Hope you enjoyed this stream. We ended exactly 2 hours. I love that. What can I do better to serve you better in these streams? Do you like this format? Do you like the Q&A format? Let me know. If you like this Q&A format, we'll keep doing it. Instead of having a topic that kind of fixes you like into the just, we have to talk about this topic. Or do you prefer the QA? Let me know in the comment section below. And I'm going to see you in the next one, you guys. Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys rock. Thank you for everybody who recently subscribed. Welcome to the channel. Enjoy the content. Take your time. The content's not going anywhere. It's going to be there. So don't feel overwhelmed when you see 500 videos on my channel. Take your time to watch this. Have a great weekend. And just try to do something else. Don't always do engineering. Find a hobby thing. Break that thing a little bit. Start learning some other thing. Do your thing, and then come back and you're gonna come back with a passion. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'll learn to send these notifications better. YouTube notification is broken. If you go click that notification bell right now, so you don't forget if I posted a live stream again. I always live stream Saturday 7 a.m. PST every single week, unless something changes. I usually put this schedule very early in the week, so it comes back. I'll do better to push it to all my Instagram and all the other social media. I'm gonna see you on the next one, guys. You guys stay awesome. Goodbye. Love you. Goodbye.